Hello everybody and welcome to this amazing Tyde guide. In this guide we'll be covering the second part of penetration and armor reduction. Now that we know how to calculate the damage, let's go over effective uses for pen and when to build it. Being that physical and magical pen are very different, we'll talk about them separately in these guides. For part 2 of this penetration guide we'll focus only on the physical portion. We have two main items that many players use as a primary source of pen, which is Titan's Bane and Executioner. Both are percentage-based pens, and it has been a widely argued topic of which item is better to get. A lot of players will comment to me that Titan's Bane is never worth it, and that they always build Executioner in its place due to its additional attack speed. What if I told you though that Executioner was actually the lesser item in majority of the situations at end game? Executioner provides a flat and percent armor reduction, which is valuable while your opponent has less protections. This is due to the flat armor reduction. In our example, we'll take Neith with 187 power and attack Nija with 70 protections. The 70 protections comes from Nija's base protections, therefore there are no bonuses added for Nija from any items, skills, or within his kit. With Titan's Bane, we'll deal a flat 182 damage across the board when we attack. When attacking with Executioner, however, we start with the lower 158 damage and raise to 198 after 4 successful basic attacks. So what does this tell us? Let's take a look at what our items are really doing. Titan's Bane penetrates about 23 protections. This leaves Nija with about 47 protections. Execution, on the other hand, is dropping our opponent's protections with full stacks to about 35. This is a much larger difference in protection, but what about the actual output of damage? The difference isn't that great. The actual change in damage mitigation is the cause. Damage with Executioner is mitigated by 26%, where Titan's Bane damage is mitigated at 32%. This is a difference of 6%, which is pretty minimal. However, is it worth it to build up the pen to deal an additional 6% when the rest of your damage has been mitigated at 60% without stacks? It is important to remember that it requires successful basic attacks for the armor reduction from Executioners to take effect. This will cause your initial attacks to deal less damage, which can be crucial while attempting to poke or burst your opponent while in lane with basics or ability damage. Without the armor reduction applied before you use your abilities, all initial abilities will have reduced damage since you lack that penetration. However, attacking after 4 basics will allow you to deal your full damage. Also, each god has a pretty average amount of protections as a base stat. Physical protections start the lowest but usually raise with each level up to an average of around 70. This means even if your opponent does not build protections, you can still use Titan's Bane as a moderately good item since you will be doing additional objective damage and only about a 6% difference when it comes to attacking your opponent. If we were to raise Nija's protections to 150, you'll see that Executioner at full stacks and Titan's Bane will only have a 2% damage mitigation difference, with Executioner dealing more damage. Even though the Executioner deals more damage at full stacks, you still lose all the damage initially. The first shot of Executioner deals 107 damage, where Titan's Bane deals 134. Then Executioner follows up the next 2 attacks with 115 and 125 damage. To compare this to Titan's Bane, it's a total loss of 55 damage over 3 attacks. Our final hit with Executioner deals 137 damage, which is only 3 damage greater than Titan's Bane. For Executioner to catch up to Titan's Bane's damage, it would require about 18 additional attacks. These basics must land before the 3-second debuff fades from the opponent, else the remainder of the attacks will have to start stacking the item all over again. What about the attack speed, you say? Well, even calculating the attack speed, you're only getting an additional 2 attacks every 10 seconds, therefore the additional speed is helpful but not enough to suggest that Executioner is the better item when your opponent has a single item of defense. Taking this into consideration, the average Joust player usually picks up a single item of defense, making Titan's Bane the overall stronger choice for Jousters at any point. Certain gods may be able to individually take advantage of the 20% attack speed, making Executioner the more viable item, but that will be a guide on that god specifically at a later point in time. However, as a general basis, Titan's Bane is the overall stronger pick, allowing you to have full access to your max damage at all times without the hassle of setting up with basic attacks. I mean, if you wish to argue that the 2% on Executioners with full stacks is still better than Titan's Bane, we can. But I can't even land basics that consistently, and you're kidding yourself if you thought you could land basics with such an extreme accuracy against an opponent with equal or greater skill. Neith, for example, would have to land 3 basic attacks before using any abilities to poke for max damage. Then she must either land all of her abilities within a 3-second time frame, or basic attack and land basic attacks between each skill to keep that Executioner debuff on the opponent. But what about Conquest? I know that saying Titan's Bane is the better item seems like an easy way to wrap things up. However, Executioner has an additional purpose when a team is involved. With armor reduction, our teammates are able to utilize our armor reduction for themselves as we allow a team of players to deal more damage. Additionally, in Conquest, our opponents are likely to not build protections. Specific roles in certain builds, a lot of players will tend to ignore the wonders of protection items. Therefore, we really need to look at what times these pen items are good for all modes. So let's look at our items individually. We shouldn't really consider Jotun's Wrath as a pen item, as it really is a cooldown item that just has 11 pen in it. This pen is helpful at all times, but we mostly keep this item for its cooldowns. Archival is a wonderfully cheap item that is great for that early game pen, but of course as the later game comes on, we need to make sure we swap it out for a more percentage pen based item. Beat Stick is an anti-healing item with a very high amount of pen. We can actually consider this item our pen item for as long as our opponent does not build 2 protection items. Once they build the second protection item, we must consider getting a real penetration item such as Executioner or Titan's Bane, but this does not mean we have to remove Beat Stick from our build. It still serves as a very powerful anti-healing item. Aussie, on the other hand, is also like Archival, where it is mostly valuable for the early game pen, but later on you must consider Titan's Bane or Executioner. Crusher, very much like Beat Stick, has a very high amount of pen for flat pen items, so it's enough to hold against a single item of protections and has a greater purpose of destroying objectives specifically. This item cannot be used in Joust. Void Shield, on the other hand, is an item I would never recommend for Joust. It's an interesting item as it is very supportive to assist allies in a more team mode, but Joust, on the other hand, there are various other ways to gain protections that you can utilize. Titan's Bane serves as probably one of the greatest forms of pen this game offers. There is no real reason not to pick this item up in Joust, as it allows you to ignore protections from just about anything. Executioner, on the other hand, works best when you can allow other allies to take advantage of your armor reduction, and your allies at this point should have other methods of flat pen to help maximize their damage. Before wrapping up, I would like to make a few additional notes about how much pen to build. In any build, you can have up to a maximum of 50 flat pen. I would only suggest you building this type of pen if you are buying the item for its passive and not just its penetration stat. Building flat pen early will help you secure high damage on the early game, but you should remember to pick up percentage pen later on. You should also never carry both Executioner and Titan's Bane. They work against each other, as Executioner will make Titan's Bane less effective. There are very few situations that you could get this combination to work, and you're just better off building one item or the other. Hopefully this helps you guys better understand your items so you know how to craft your build. As a Joust player, Titan's Bane may be the better item, but don't forget that Executioner serves as a better item for a team as well. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and we'll be taking a look at the magical side of penetration, as it is fairly different in our next guide. Thank you all for watching, like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.